User Kinging, right? Thank you. Thank you. This was very informative. How do you deal with personality disorders? Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. And she's asking about how I deal with personality disorders working inside of corrections. So there's two types of personalities, two ways to approach this, I should say. You have to work, you have to be prepared to work with the guys, women and men who are incarcerated, right? Which I'm sure you're prepared for when you go in there. But you also need to be prepared for the people who work there who have very strong personality traits and are not behind bars in a lot of areas. It also depends. I would also say it depends on what type of prison you work at, or you decide to go to. For me, I worked at a medium security prison. So medium security prison and maximum security and supermax are probably going to work differently because supermax is very extreme. And I have experience in working with supermax men because, when I left corrections, we were starting to get a lot of guys from Supermax, like Pelican Bay in California. So they were doing a lot of transfers and trying to reintegrate guys that had been in Supermax for a long time down in more medium security. So, I'll start with the inmates first. Inmates know what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing. But an inmate is going to inmate, which means that they're going to try to manipulate you and get what they can get from you. That's part of their job. It's who they are. And as long as you're aware of that going in and that you are prepared to say no, or enforce boundaries, then that's fine. I think it's good. It's always good to enforce boundaries. It's always good to tell people that they know better, ask them what, in my case, this is what I do. You know better, that's inappropriate. Are you supposed to be doing that? So, being able to modify behavior and tell them that they're not going to get things or that I'm not going to give them stuff. So I don't break any of the rules. So, you're not supposed to hand inmates things directly like notes, pens, or anything like that. So, employees, most people, I should say, at least from California where I'm from, they know what they're supposed to be doing. So you need to follow the rules and follow the etiquette as well. So you have to understand that going into work that inmates are not your friends. It doesn't mean that you can't build rapport, but they're looking for anything that they can get. And a lot of them are very, very savvy, and they want to know information. Google is out there. If you have a business, if you have a license, if you have any sort of whatever, they're going to find it. So I've had people who have done that, and they'll have their mom or somebody reach out and they just want to know. But you have to let them know that things are inappropriate and be prepared to enforce the rules, but also be very respectful. So you can be respectful. And I found that when I was very respectful, they appreciated that. And then, I kind of show up and do my job every day. And I understand that they're all, they're watching me, any opportunity that they can get. Recognize with personality disorders, there can be idealization. So you can be someone's favorite, but just as much as you can be someone's favorite, you can also be devalued pretty quickly. So they can also act out. They hate you, this and that. And, they project things onto you. And again, I worked with men and I've worked with women. So, a lot of them, view you as their parent. They view you as their partner or somebody else, and so they have all of these expectations. So transference is going to be a real thing. So consultation. So be sure to have supervision. Be sure that I use dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, person-centered therapy, and all of the things that are very integrated into one. But I also I was also very reciprocal. So, it wasn't always me in the teaching position. I was, I allowed for inmates to teach me sometimes. So a lot of times they teach me about culture. We have conversations about things that are real. So I'm not like just sort of reading from a book. I'm having real world conversations with them about things and just kind of mixing it up and talking about politics and other things like that too. So, you become very sociable, and treating them like human beings. But, you have expectations. I have the expectation that you will show up to counseling. I have the expectation that you will take your meds. I have the expectation that you go to school and things like that and do the things that you're supposed to do. This isn't a time for you to just sort of lay around, kick back, and do drugs and watch television. So they have to know that you have some expectation. And I found that people really respond well to that when you're invested in them, you respect them, and you have expectations. And we revisit the rules when necessary. Keep hands, feet, and other objects to yourself, and write-ups when necessary when they have to do that. So for the people that are not incarcerated that actually work with you, I think they're the bigger concerns, right? Because depending on where you work, I worked at a prison that was very much good old boy culture, and good old boy culture is for white boys, and so when recognize when you're dealing with that, like all that stuff that they tell you about whistleblowing and OSHA and sexual harassment, that stuff kind of goes out the window. Every woman, I think, and I hate to say it this way, but this is just realistically the way it was. Every woman, I think, if you're attractive, you're going to be sexually harassed. So my thing would be is just to be, or men too, because it does go both ways, and I've seen it go both ways. But my advice to you would be to keep your head down, do what you're supposed to do, sort of. If you have a boss that's very personality disordered, right, which happens a lot, you do have to sort of pander to the ego a little bit and say, oh, well, thank you for showing me that. And, oh, I'm just so glad that I have you to show me, show me the ropes and things like that. And just sort of pander to their ego. That usually gets them. But then, just sort of minimize contact as much as you can. I would say that, as long as you fly under the radar and you do your job, and you don't even have to do your job. Like, as long as you pander to the ego. There are a lot of people that just sort of did that, finesse the boss's ego and didn't really do their job or whatever. They were able to sort of skate by on that. I like to do my job, so I want to do my job when I'm there, to each his own as far as that goes. But also too, I think, sometimes people, bosses try to rope you in to gossip and, undermine other employees. I stay away from that, and just kind of, minimize contact from that. And like, we don't have to like each other. We'll just work. And so, just kind of do your 8 and skate type of thing. It's what I would recommend doing. Just, get in, do your thing and get out. And remember why you're there. Like, I'm there to get my paycheck, these great benefits, or blah, 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 blah. All right. So you have to keep the motivation going inside of your mind. That would be one thing. I was good at my job. So, I did have, supervisors that try to micromanage, and devalue my work, but I was good at my job and they knew that. So at the end of the day, when we would have attorneys, that would come, they would always want me to present because they knew how good of a clinician that I was. And I always got like a tough caseload. So, I would just, have boundaries too, to mediate that because, when they see that you're good, they'll definitely, break a good person's back and give them all the work or all the hard work. So have your boundaries around that. You can be polite and be respectful, but don't be a pushover, and then just, get out of there. And if you ever find yourself in a position where you're targeted, I can't tell you what to do, but like it might be time to go and move around, transfer institutions and things like that. So that's always an option where I was.